Jobs with better pay, perks, and flexibility, particularly with the option to work remotely, became widespread during pandemic. While some were losing jobs or staff, some were getting employed. HR experts say businesses that don't offer any kind of flexible work options are losing out on at least 70% of job seekers. To find out how true that is, stick around on Let's Talk as we discuss lack of work flexibility. Babajide Alao, Director, People and Culture at Vancity Education Group International, Canada, is my guest, and my name is Oluja Hussein. Welcome, and thank you for staying tuned. But as usual, I'd like to remind you to please and please, if you haven't subscribed to DNTWOK on YouTube or you haven't followed us on all of our social media platforms, it is time you do so. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Babajide, for coming on the show. It's nice having you here. Now, when we say work flexibility, what do we mean?
Thank you so much for having me in the program. I appreciate this a lot. I hope this is the first of many. So for me, when it comes to workplace flexibility, I like to, go to the very basics of semantics itself. We have a workplace, we have flexibility, which simply emphasizes, the willingness and the ability for change, people to adapt to change. And when am I talking about people, I'm relating both to employee and employers as well, especially when it regards to, how, when, and where work is done, right? So in a very flexible workplace, what we try to see is what we're looking forward to is, where the needs of both the employer and the employees are both met at the same time. So workplace flexibility does offer, a lot more of opportunities for, great organizations to retaining, and retaining and engaging, high-performing employees, just like you mentioned earlier with the introduction right there. So it does provide a lot more opportunities for organization, especially reaching their goal with a much more clear, improved productivity as well too. There are so many names where people throw around, especially when it comes to workplace flexibility. Some people would call it, work and life balance, while others would call it just flexible, work arrangements as well.
Now, before COVID, or should I say lockdown, how would you describe work experience?
Well, I would say before COVID, a lot of things have changed. So much after COVID, during COVID, uh, so many different organizations and workplaces have chosen to adapt. And those who have not been able to adapt, unfortunately, have been faced with the hammer of change. Before the COVID-19, there's been a lot of conversations around workplace balance and how to ensure workers and employers are having this equilibrium of their needs being met and satisfied. And so what a lot of people have been used to in the past has been less flexibility with workplaces. I know, for example, a lot of some different financial institutions before COVID, they have, maintain the traditional work environment where people would have to come to a brick and mortar business and, maintain that 9 to 5 or, working environment. Some would say there's been a lot of flexibility, especially with work arrangements. Some will be a lot more formal flexibility, which is more a typical, ongoing arrangement that is very different from, team standards of work and, work hours and work location. And it could include maybe working remotely or maybe changing the schedule. Some of these things, we haven't been seeing as much of it before the pandemic. But a lot of different changes, people trying to adapt, organizations, businesses, employees are trying to adapt to the recent changes now. We've been seeing more of, a lot more informal flexibility, which is more occasional, where there's that agreement between an employee and his manager and has a very little impact on others in the very workplace.
So why is work flexibility important, especially when it comes to balancing life and home front?
That's a very good question. And thank you for asking that. So, when it comes to creating that workplace work and life balance, it is very important not only for the employee, right, but also for the organization, the employers as well, too, because you have a lot more flexibility to work with. And I want us to be very careful when we're looking at this concept workplace flexibility, because it does affect a lot of different stakeholders in this situation. We've talked about the employees. Having a flexible employees, of course, would mean an opportunity to be able to have a different orientation towards flexibility, where people are not thinking, well, it's not my job, do I have to do that, or do I have to do this or not? But employees are actually modifying their approach towards task, based on the preferences of stakeholders, as I mentioned earlier, and the unique demand of each work situations as well. So there's a lot of flexibility that comes on the part of workers as well, and flexibility is a trait that a lot of employers are looking forward to in employees, especially regardless of whatever job you're doing or you're applying for, because it does benefit your candidacy, that you can show your interviewer examples of how you're flexible and how you're willing to change course with situations as well. I've mentioned another different example. Initial one was flexibility with workers, and some of the ways where workers can demonstrate flexibility could be maybe learning to adapt to complex or new complex softwares that can help increase efficiency. Maybe learning to listen more carefully to constructive criticism as part of performance review could also help a lot. Offering to work extra hours sometimes, maybe during a year-end crunch, could be very good. Some people would say overtime is probably not too much to be advised, but I would say sometimes it gives you a very good leverage for you to show that flexibility as well to your employer, that you're willing to work overtime to help a colleague or help the organization meet the deadline. So flexibility on the part of the employer is very, very important. Now, on the employee rather. Now let's look at flexibility on the part of the employer. Managers who are very flexible to provide workers, with great, I would say, clarity and latitude about the way they accomplish their goals, they experience a lot more progress than managers who do not, right? And so they help to assess the needs of employees, and provide feedback, guidance, recognitions to individuals who are actually optimizing and providing top performance within the organization. So when we see flexibility, it does cut across so many different areas. We've talked about the employees. Having a flexible schedule as well is very important. I'm not sure if you're aware right now, there has been a new movement that has happened before COVID. Even during COVID, a lot of experimenting has been done with this, new ideology of having a 4 days work week, right? Which is much different from the typical 5 days work week that we all, used to experiencing. But now there's been this new approach of a very flexible schedule, where workers could actually come in and work, say for example, 7 hours every single day, and then work 4 days a week, which is much more different from the typical 40 hours a week work schedule that most people are used to. There's also telecommuting, right? In the past, before, there hasn't been as much remote working, people having opportunity to actually work from home. But now there's been so much flexibility that we're seeing now, around the workplace with schedules, right? There's been a lot more of employees and employers taking advantage of work from home opportunities, which has reduced a lot of cost on the side of the employer, and also majorly reduce a lot of cost also on the part of the employee as well, because you get to reduce your gas time you spend on the road. If you're not driving, maybe you get to use major transit systems and things like that. You're using way more less time on your transit card and on the transit to work as well too, which is saving you a lot in terms of your health and so many more things, right? We've seen some reduced schedules, which I mentioned earlier, the 4 hours a week, 4 days a week work schedule. We've seen condensed schedules as well, where people have been condensed, given very much fewer time to get the jobs done. So there's a lot more benefit that does come with workplace flexibility, right? One of them I would say is a lot more loyalty. If you have an organization that is providing you, listening to your needs, providing you flexibility around your schedule, so you can be able to take care of your own life as well too, right? A lot more employees have been able to, based on surveys and statistics, they've actually said that this has helped them a lot more in increasing the engagement with the employers, right? And, loyalty as well, again, to the business, and retention has been high. which is reducing long-term turnover for most organizations, and the cost of recruiting and training new hires have been reduced drastically.
Okay. You said something about flexibility being a trait. How is that?
As I mentioned earlier, it is important for an employee, rather, and also employer as well, to be able to demonstrate and show that this work environment is not a rigid one, right? It's one that listens to its people. It's one that is always open to feedback and also willing to give feedback as well, right? So if employees, right, are able to demonstrate to, as a candidate, to whatever prospect they're pushing out for, and that they're always open, more flexible, and willing to adapt, willing to change course as things happen. I think a lot more employers are looking out for a lot more, greater gems. I'll call them unique gems in the society and in the workforce.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's quickly go on this break and we will be right back. Stay tuned. It's still Let's Talk on DNTWOK, and I've been speaking with Babajide Alao, the Director of People and Culture at Vancity Education Group International, Canada. And, our topic has been work flexibility, how flexible are employers to employee. So that's what we've been discussing, and he's been doing a good job at that. Thank you so much. So if you're just joining us, you still have time to catch up on the previous discussion, even as you go for your replay. Thank you for watching also. Thank you, Mr. Alao, for standing by.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you touched on one of my questions earlier, and that's the effect or how it affects workplace. So I want you to please speak further on how work flexibility actually affects workplace or affects individuals.
Thank you so much for the question. You see, I think it's at the end of the day, what really matters is a win-win situation for everybody. And this is one approach that we have always promoted within our policies, organizations, corporate policies, our procedures, even our core values actually push for these types of opportunities where there's flexibility for a lot more, a lot of employees that we work with us, right? Now, a flexible work environment has a lot more effect and benefit that it brings to the employer and the employee. First, let's start with the employee. It helps. I don't usually like to use the word workers, but I, I want to use the word team members. Okay, so it helps a lot more team members to achieve, that greater work-life balance situation. And this is one of our policies at Advanced Education. We always believe life comes first before work, right? And work is very important to us. But when someone has a more pressing issue, say, for example, I don't know, a couple or whatever it is, or an individual, let's use the word an individual, rather, right, is coming to work, and before leaving home, they've had to deal with issues around, maybe they were worried about bills, or maybe they've had, some conflict at home as well. Whatever could happen, maybe it wasn't even at home, maybe it was on the way during the transit. Something's happened to people, right? And becoming disoriented, demotivated to work. Now, when you ignore those situations and ignore those situations that have happened prior to your employee coming to work that morning, there's likelihood that what they're going to provide and offer to you as an organization will be totally low productivity that is not eating or meeting your expectations. So what do you do? How do you salvage that situation? By first of all, understanding that they have a life first before the work they're doing. And trying to, have that conversation, as I mentioned earlier, opening engagement with your employee gives you that opportunity to be able to listen to them and provide flexibility around the work situation, right? Because, of course, like I said, if they're coming demotivated, disoriented to the engagement, there is definitely going to be low productivity, which does not benefit anyone at the end of the day. And which is going to be, of course, either a lose-lose situation or a win-lose situation. Someone is going to win and someone is going to lose. And what do I mean by that? The employee gets paid for the day, but the productivity for the organization is not really there. So a work-life balance leads to increased employee satisfaction and improved morale. It turns an employee's, the turnover is really, really reduced. The employee turnover is totally reduced. You don't see more people wanting to leave an organization because they like to be there. They want to be there. They feel listened, they feel heard, and definitely reduces the cost of recruiting and training new hires for the organization and employer.
Mm. Thank you so much for that. Are there dangers? While I was doing my introduction, a lot of jobs lose, at least they stand the chance of losing at least 70% of workforce as a result of unreasonable work expectations like that. Now, what are the barriers to having a flexible working arrangement?
Well, that's a great question because when you're trying to create in that utopian world, utopian workplace environment that benefits, provide the win-win situation for the employer and employee, there's always going to be hurdles, right? Challenges along the way. For this situation, I would say one thing is it does depend on industry to industry as well, and every single organization, there's no one organization that is the same. Every one of them are totally unique from each other, right? So what works for one organization may not work for the next organization. So what do you do, right? So a lot of barriers that you experience would be, of course, again, like I said, the difference and unique situations of industries to industry, right? Another barrier is, again, we have issues of poor management where we have a management system that actually is quite rigid, traditional, and not willing to change. Some of the issues around that could even lead to a lot more barriers to this work and life balance. Office politics. Office politics, again, is one of the things I've always, advocated against. It does not help or promote any form of LT, relationship between managers and employees or at any time. So taking away and eradicating completely forms of office politics and providing fair and equitable opportunities for everybody, right, would help to reduce the barriers and the challenges, these hurdles that are affecting workplace flexibility for employees and employers as well. Lack of communication, which again strikes down to the core value and the culture of organizations. I would say most organizations would like and would prefer moving on to incorporate and encourage, communication across all channels and across all levels, of leadership and all levels of the organizational chart as well too. There should be free flow of communication. There should be access to access for employees to be able to voice and hear their concerns in a much more safe and inclusive way, right? So some of these things, if we can address them, and it's much easier to address. I understand, of course, industry to industry might take a little bit longer time to approach, but having a much more diverse and unifying code of conduct, right, that helps to promote flexibility around workplace could help alleviate and soften all this challenges.
How can lack of work flexibility be treated, handled, or overcome?
Thank you so much for that. I think that's a very great question. Some of it I think I was able to answer earlier, but it's a great opportunity to actually focus on this point really well. like we talked about earlier, being able to provide flexible scheduling, um, providing that informal and formal workplace flexibility is very important. Having, I would like to say, training and recruiting top level management that understands the need, the importance, and why, because it all really matters. If you have a strong why into whatever you're doing, it's much more important and compelling for every individual to push forward to a much more better workplace environment. So yes, redesigning your organizational chat, having a much more easier communication flow for all levels of leadership is very important. Being able to provide training, continuous training and development for everyone within the organization, providing them as much information, letting them understand the importance of workplace flexibility. And also, this is one thing I love to say in most situations, right? Do what you say. Leave and leave. I mean, sorry, lead by example. Leave and lead by example is also very important. So I do encourage a lot of my colleagues out there to also, try to promote LT policies within the organizations that can encourage and improve on workplace flexibility.
Any final word?
Well, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me and having me on your sessions. I think, again, at the end of the day, having the conversations around workplace flexibility and promoting the benefits that it brings to both employers and employees, helping people to see that it's a win-win situation, actually, promotes a lot more better environment and LT relationship for everybody, including all stakeholders, employees, employers, and everyone in our society. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alao, for coming on the show. It's nice having you.
Same here.
And thank you too for watching this episode of Let's Talk. And until next time, when I come your way again with another exciting topic, I remain Oluja Masako. Bye for now.